Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Daniel inherited his serene 20-acre farm, he never imagined his greatest challenge wouldn't come from nature, but from his neighbor, Karen. What began as petty complaints spiraled into sabotage, arson, and a courtroom showdown. This is the gripping tale of justice triumphing over relentless greed. Daniel White, a 42-year-old craftsman, had always considered himself fortunate to inherit the family farm in the heart of rural Maine. Nestled in a serene valley, his 20-acre property was a picture of rustic charm. Towering pines lined the edges of the land, their silhouettes brushing against the horizon at dusk, while an old oak tree near the farmhouse stood as a silent witness to generations who had lived and worked here. The farm wasn't just a piece of land, it was a legacy, brimming with stories, sweat, and a quiet resilience. Daniel's life revolved around his woodworking business, a craft passed down from his father and grandfather before him. In a workshop built with their own hands, Daniel transformed raw timber into masterpieces, chairs that seemed to invite you to sit forever, intricately carved tables, and rocking chairs that sang with the rhythm of generations. His reputation for quality and care drew customers from near and far. Local farmers, urbanites looking for a touch of authenticity, and even collectors from out of state cherished his creations. Access to this slice of paradise was through a single gravel road, snaking its way along the boundary of Daniel's property and that of his new neighbor, Karen. The road had a history of its own, tied to an easement established over 50 years ago. It had served the Whites and the prior owners of Karen's property without issue, providing unimpeded access to Daniel's farm and his thriving business. Karen had moved into the neighboring property only a few months prior. At first, she seemed like an ordinary transplant from the city. Chatty, inquisitive, maybe a little too eager to share her opinions on the aesthetics of rural life. She spoke nostalgically of quiet evenings and untouched landscapes, her words laced with a thinly veiled disdain for the practicalities of working farmland. Daniel, ever polite, kept his distance, greeting her with a nod or a wave when their paths crossed. But Karen's enthusiasm for rural charm soon turned into something less benign. It began with small remarks, seemingly innocent at first. "The trucks that visit your workshop kick up quite a bit of dust," she noted one day. Another time, she gestured toward his workshop with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's such a shame to have something so industrial in a place like this." Daniel dismissed these comments as the ramblings of someone unaccustomed to country life. The tipping point came during a warm summer morning when Daniel, loading a meticulously crafted dining table into a client's van, was interrupted by Karen storming across the boundary. Her face was flushed with anger, and she waved a piece of paper like it was a royal decree. She accused him of destroying the peaceful aesthetic of the area with his trucks, tools, and deliveries. "This is not what I signed up for," she declared, her voice rising. "This isn't a factory district," Daniel tried to explain, calmly pointing out the easement and his rights to use the road. But Karen dismissed his words with a scoff. "That agreement is ancient. It's irrelevant now," she insisted. Her accusations became more absurd by the minute, culminating in a claim that his business was lowering her property value and driving away potential buyers. Daniel, patient but firm, refused to engage further, leaving her ranting in the middle of the gravel road. Karen's discontent with Daniel's presence quickly turned from passive-aggressive remarks to outright hostility. She began filing complaints with local authorities, painting a dramatic picture of environmental destruction and noise pollution caused by Daniel's business. "His trucks are tearing up the gravel road," she wrote in one complaint. "The constant deliveries and industrial noise are ruining the peaceful countryside for everyone." Her claims were grossly exaggerated, of course. Daniel's work vehicles were modest, no different than the pickup trucks and tractors owned by other locals. His workshop operated strictly during business hours, and even then, the hum of his tools was faint and far less intrusive than Karen's frequent lawn parties. But Karen wasn't looking for accuracy, she was looking for leverage. When the complaints failed to produce immediate results, Karen took matters into her own hands. She approached Daniel with an ultimatum: pay her $1,000 a month for commercial use of the shared access road, or face consequences. Daniel, stunned by the audacity of the demand, firmly refused. "This road is under a legally recorded easement," he reminded her, presenting the document. But Karen dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "That agreement is outdated," she said smugly. "If you want to keep using the road, you'll pay for it." Daniel's refusal only fueled Karen's vendetta. Late one night, under the cover of darkness, Karen took her scheme to a new level. With the help of a hired hand, she installed a heavy metal gate at the entrance to the gravel road. Secured with a chain and padlock, it completely blocked access to Daniel's property. A crudely written sign hung on the gate. "No entry without payment. Contact Karen." When Daniel discovered the barrier the next morning, he was outraged. His first instinct was to call the police, confident that they would rectify the situation. But when the officers arrived, Karen met them armed with a thick folder of papers. "This road is on my property," she declared, handing over what she claimed were legal documents proving her rights. The papers were a mishmash of old maps, handwritten notes, and internet printouts designed to confuse rather than clarify. The officers, reluctant to take sides in what they saw as a civil dispute, advised Daniel to resolve the matter through the courts. "It's best to let a judge sort this out," one of them said, clearly uneasy about the dubious nature of Karen's claims, but unwilling to act without definitive proof. Karen watched the exchange from the edge of her property, arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on her face. As the police left, she called out, "Told you I wasn't bluffing, Daniel. Pay up or enjoy being stuck." Frustrated but undeterred, Daniel knew he had to act quickly. He documented everything: the gate, the lock, the sign, and his interactions with Karen. He called his lawyer, detailing the situation. "This is not just a violation of the easement," the lawyer said grimly. "She's effectively holding your property hostage. We'll need to file for an emergency injunction." While the legal process began, Daniel faced immediate challenges. He had deliveries scheduled that day, both incoming materials and outgoing orders. Unable to use the road, he had to call clients and suppliers, explaining the absurd predicament. Every canceled delivery meant lost income and disappointed customers. But Karen seemed to revel in his frustration. She even set up a lawn chair near the gate, sipping lemonade as she watched him struggle, waving mockingly whenever he glanced her way. As the hours dragged on, Daniel grew increasingly determined. Karen's actions weren't just inconveniencing him, they were an attack on his livelihood and his family's legacy. With his lawyer working to expedite the case, Daniel began building a comprehensive record of Karen's harassment. Little did she know, every smug remark, every fabricated document, and every act of defiance would soon become evidence against her in court. The legal battle between Daniel and Karen escalated into a full-blown war of wits, patience, and resilience. Following the emergency injunction filed by Daniel's attorney, Karen realized that her position was growing more precarious. Instead of backing down, she doubled down on her antics, ramping up her campaign of sabotage and manipulation. In the days leading up to the court hearing, Karen began orchestrating accidents on the gravel road. Branches from nearby trees mysteriously fell across the path overnight, their jagged ends strategically placed to puncture tires. Piles of rocks and debris appeared seemingly out of nowhere, forcing Daniel's delivery trucks to either reroute or risk damage. Karen, of course, feigned innocence whenever questioned. "Must have been the wind," she said with a saccharine smile when Daniel confronted her. "This is nature, after all." But Karen's audacity didn't stop there. She installed several cameras along the shared road, claiming they were for security purposes. Their real purpose, however, was clear. Karen began using the footage to fabricate accusations against Daniel, alleging that his vehicles were speeding, trespassing, or causing environmental harm. She even sent a compilation of these so-called violations to the local authorities, framing herself as the vigilant guardian of rural harmony. Daniel, though frustrated, refused to be baited. His attorney, Claire Maddox, was a seasoned litigator with a reputation for dismantling weak arguments. She meticulously compiled a case against Karen, gathering every piece of evidence: videos of the blocked road, photographs of the debris, and testimonials from delivery drivers and neighbors who had witnessed Karen's behavior. Each element of the case painted a damning picture of a neighbor intent on harassment rather than harmony. When the court date arrived, the tension was palpable. The courtroom was packed with curious locals, eager to see the resolution of the conflict that had disrupted their otherwise quiet valley. Karen strutted into the room, clutching her folder of dubious documents, her confidence radiating as she prepared to play the part of the righteous protector. Karen began her defense with a self-assured air, claiming her actions were motivated by a deep concern for the community. She accused Daniel of exploiting the shared road for personal gain, disregarding its upkeep, and creating an unsafe environment. "I only wanted to preserve the peace and integrity of our neighborhood," she declared dramatically, as if she were delivering a sermon. Claire, unfazed, rose to present Daniel's case. With precision and poise, she dismantled Karen's narrative piece by piece. She began with the easement agreement, a legally binding document that explicitly granted Daniel unrestricted access to the road. The judge nodded as Claire explained its unambiguous language, leaving no room for Karen's reinterpretations. Next, Claire introduced the recordings of Karen's sabotage, footage of her scattering branches, dragging rocks into the roadway, and even tampering with Daniel's mailbox. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the videos played, each clip underscoring Karen's malicious intent. The crowning moment came when Claire presented Karen's own camera footage, recontextualized to show how she had orchestrated the very incidents she accused Daniel of causing. Karen's confidence began to crack. She interrupted repeatedly, protesting that she was misunderstood, but her pleas only served to irritate the judge. "Mrs. Caldwell," the judge said sternly, "please allow counsel to finish." As Claire wrapped up her case, she delivered a final blow, an affidavit from a local arborist confirming that the branches found on the road had been sawed off intentionally, not broken by the wind. The evidence was irrefutable. Karen's campaign of deceit was laid bare for all to see. The judge, visibly unimpressed with Karen's theatrics, called a recess to deliberate. When the court reconvened, the verdict was swift and decisive. As the courtroom reconvened, the air was thick with anticipation. The judge, having reviewed the mountain of evidence and heard every argument, began delivering his verdict with measured authority. Karen, seated at her table, looked less like the self-assured crusader she had claimed to be, and more like someone grappling with the reality of consequences she had never anticipated. "Mrs. Caldwell," the judge began, his voice steady and firm, "your actions in this matter are not merely a dispute over property rights. They represent a deliberate and sustained campaign to obstruct, intimidate, and harass Mr. White in his lawful use of an easement. This court finds your behavior egregious, malicious, and entirely without merit." The gallery was silent, every word of the judge's rebuke ringing clearly in the packed room. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her confidence visibly unraveling. The judge continued, laying out his ruling. "First, you are hereby ordered to immediately remove any and all obstacles you have placed on the easement road. This includes the gate, the lock, and any debris you have deposited there. The road is to be restored to its prior condition within 48 hours, and you will bear the full cost of this restoration." Karen's jaw tightened, but she dared not speak as the judge pressed on. "Second, given the malicious nature of your actions, this court issues a restraining order. You are prohibited from coming within 200 meters of Mr. White's property, his business, or his clients. This includes the easement road, which you are barred from obstructing in any way. Failure to comply with this order will result in immediate penalties, including incarceration." The final part of the ruling brought a palpable shift in the room. Lastly, the judge said, his tone grave, "The evidence presented today suggests a pattern of fraudulent behavior. Your repeated attempts to misrepresent property boundaries, manipulate legal documents, and interfere with lawful activities raise significant concerns. Therefore, this case is being referred to the district attorney's office for further investigation into potential criminal charges, including fraud and malicious mischief." Karen visibly paled as the weight of these words sank in. The prospect of criminal prosecution was not something she had anticipated in her misguided crusade against Daniel. For Daniel, the ruling was a hard-fought victory, but it was bittersweet. While the immediate threats to his property and business had been neutralized, the ordeal had left scars, not just on his land, but on his trust in neighborly goodwill. Still, as he walked out of the courtroom, flanked by his attorney and supportive community members, he felt a renewed sense of hope. Justice had been served, and the system had worked, albeit after a grueling process. Back at the farm, the offending gate was removed the very next day, leaving the road clear once more. Karen's cameras were dismantled, her fabricated accusations dismantled in court, and her influence within the local community evaporated. As for the pending investigation, Daniel knew it was now in the hands of the law, a reassurance that her actions would not go unchecked or unpunished. The valley began to feel peaceful again, the heavy shadow of Karen's interference lifting. And while the battle had been arduous, Daniel took solace in the fact that standing his ground had made all the difference. The scars left by Karen's malice would heal, and the lessons learned would strengthen his resolve for whatever challenges the future might hold. For a brief moment, it seemed the legal judgment would bring an end to Karen's relentless harassment. The gate was removed, the road was cleared, and the restraining order went into effect. Daniel began to rebuild the routines that Karen had disrupted, hoping to restore the peaceful rhythm of his life. But for Karen, defeat in court wasn't the end. It was a trigger for an even more destructive phase. Late one night, while Daniel was asleep, his security cameras captured a shadowy figure moving across his property. Clad in dark clothing and wearing gloves, Karen carried a gas canister toward the small storage shed Daniel used to house tools and materials for his woodworking business. Moments later, the feed showed the flicker of flames, which quickly erupted into a full-blown inferno. By the time Daniel and the local fire department arrived, the shed was reduced to smoldering ruins. As devastating as the loss was, Karen's arrogance was her undoing. The cameras captured every detail of her actions, her approach, the pouring of gasoline, and her hasty retreat as the fire engulfed the shed. Armed with this damning evidence, Daniel immediately contacted the police, who arrived to assess the scene. The officers reviewed the footage and wasted no time issuing a warrant for Karen's arrest. By dawn, Karen was in custody, facing serious charges of arson, trespassing, and violating the restraining order. As the investigation deepened, more troubling details about her past emerged. During her interrogation, Karen's attempts to defend her actions unraveled, and she inadvertently revealed her history of similar schemes. Detectives discovered that Karen had orchestrated nearly identical conflicts in at least 4 other counties. Her pattern was strikingly consistent. She would purchase property adjacent to easements or shared roads, then launch campaigns of harassment and sabotage against the owners. Her ultimate goal was either extorting money or forcing the owners to sell their land or businesses at a reduced price. Karen had even succeeded in several of her past attempts, pocketing settlements from property owners who couldn't endure the cost or stress of prolonged legal battles. However, her schemes had never reached the level of destruction or attention as they did with Daniel, and this time the evidence against her was overwhelming. The district attorney, now armed with Karen's history, moved quickly to build a robust case. The charges against her escalated to include fraud, malicious mischief, and conspiracy, in addition to the arson and trespassing charges stemming from Daniel's case. Witnesses from her previous conflicts were contacted, and several agreed to testify, eager to expose Karen's predatory behavior. As news of Karen's arrest and her history spread, her reputation crumbled. The community, once wary of taking sides in the dispute, now rallied behind Daniel, appalled by Karen's actions. Her previous victims began to come forward, sharing stories of financial losses, vandalism, and intimidation. Together, they formed a united front to ensure Karen would finally face the consequences of her actions. For Daniel, the fire was a painful setback, both financially and emotionally. Yet it also marked a turning point. Karen's willingness to escalate her vendetta to such dangerous levels had brought her downfall. With her crimes exposed and her tactics documented, Daniel could finally see a path toward lasting peace. Not just for himself, but for the many others who had suffered under Karen's manipulative schemes. The final chapter of Karen's saga unfolded in the courtroom, where justice was served with a resounding verdict. Found guilty on multiple charges, including arson, fraud, and threats, Karen was sentenced to 7 years in prison. The court also ordered her to pay $500,000 in damages to Daniel, a sum meant to cover the destruction of his shed, legal fees, and the financial losses caused by her malicious campaign. The weight of her punishment reflected not just the severity of her actions, but also her pattern of exploiting others for personal gain. For Daniel, the verdict marked the end of a grueling ordeal. With the road cleared, the shed rebuilt, and his name vindicated, his woodworking business entered a new era of prosperity. The community, galvanized by his perseverance, rallied behind him, driving new customers to his workshop. Local newspapers ran stories celebrating his victory, dubbing it a triumph of justice over greed. Orders flooded in, not just from nearby residents, but from people who admired his resilience and wanted to support his craft. The case left a lasting mark on the community. Karen's blatant misuse of property laws became a cautionary tale, inspiring neighbors to band together and form a voluntary fund. This fund, designed to assist victims of similar disputes, stood as a testament to the solidarity that had grown out of Daniel's struggle. Local authorities also took note, using the case as an example to strengthen protections for property owners, ensuring that no one else would face Karen's brand of predatory manipulation. As for Karen, her downfall was complete. Upon her release from prison, her name was added to a national registry of individuals involved in real estate fraud, effectively barring her from purchasing properties adjacent to easements or with shared access rights. Stripped of her tools for manipulation, she faded into obscurity, her schemes now a relic of her tarnished past. Looking back, Daniel found solace in knowing that his fight had not only restored his own peace, but also sparked meaningful change. His story became a beacon for standing firm against injustice, proving that resilience, when paired with community support, could overcome even the most persistent adversaries. And as the seasons changed on his farm, with the gravel road now untroubled and his workshop thriving, Daniel was reminded of a simple truth: even the darkest conflicts can pave the way for brighter futures.